When I went to China was really how aggressive Chinese media was in dealing with I mean issues domestic and foreign. I mean I think we have this static picture derived from perhaps the 1960s and 70s that it's a very compliant, very boring media. Actually, if you are at the receiving end, it's not that different from Indian media. I mean, I still would say, okay, Indian media is a league of its own, but still it's there is a lot of questioning and a lot of I would say articulate, a lot of free speech and pushing by the Chinese media. Now, what we've tried to do really is we've actually taken delegations of Chinese media. Usually these are editors and senior journalists from the print, from the TV, from magazines, from websites. And we take them to India, and we do this fairly regularly. We do about 3-4 of this a year. On an average, about 15 to 20 people are taken. And we actually give them exposure to a high level of Indian leadership. So they typically would meet national security advisor or foreign secretary or the heads of CII or FICCI, and we take them to private companies, we take them to universities, and we found it's actually made some difference that people have come back from India with a I wouldn't say that suddenly they underwent a conversion, but certainly they ended up with a more balanced view. Now, at some point of time, I noticed, and I think Ambassador Changyan here sort of gets the credit, we found the Chinese were doing the same thing. The Chinese were also bringing teams of Indian media to China and taking them around so I think when I refer to the fact that there's more media activity and government is today supporting it, it's in a sense, we've seen this particularly after 2009, far more sort of interactions and travels by correspondents, by editors, commentators of the two. Sorry? Yeah, there are a lot of Indians. Yeah, there are Indians working in Chinese media as well. On the influence of the media, I think it's not realistic for us to think that media should give up a good story because the government doesn't like it or people in diplomacy are uncomfortable with it. They've got their business to run, we've got ours to run, and we've got to find a way of dealing with them. And frankly, this has been a bit of a challenge in China because I think there are often expectations from the Chinese system. What they say, please give proper guidance to your media. Now, anybody who's dealt with the Indian media, guidance is it's not part of our media history because we have other thoughts then coming. I think the way to deal with that is in a sense staying ahead of the game, which is you monitor the stories, you sort of become a pre-breaking news embassy. I carry 3 phones with me and I'm on 5 accounts all the time because I am checking that anything that happens I should know before the breaking news guys know it, so that I am in a position to deal with it and actually try and shape it as it unfolds. Ideally, I even shape the unfolding if I can. But I've got to change my way of working to deal with this media situation. The media is not going to change its way of working in deference to our sensitivities. The question of how is China playing 1962? China, I think Chinese media has been very cautious. There have been, I haven't seen in People's Daily, in Xinhua or in PLA Daily any suo moto commentary on the 1962 conflict at all. Other papers have carried commentaries, and often I would say the peg on which those stories are run is something which happens out of India. Someone has made some comment in India, So that becomes an issue of debate in India, and the Chinese feel, someone in China feels compelled to comment on that. So, for example, would the use of air power in 1962 have made a difference in the outcome? As you know, it was debated in India, and then there were comments in China about the debate in India. So I think a fair description of the Chinese attitude towards 1962 has been very reactive and very cautious. On teaching Mandarin, where are you going to get the resources from China? The Chinese government, the Ministry of Education, has an agency called Hanban. And Hanban actually runs courses for teaching. They are, by the way, the folks who run Confucius centers. So they actually teach language teachers abroad. So this is a multi-year, complicated, but ambitious initiative. So what we need to do is probably, we are looking at a number, we still haven't got a fix, but probably about 100 teachers in India who sort of first go to China and spend a few years in China, and in a sense become trainee teachers. And then they in turn kind of teach people in India. So it's not going to be something that's going to happen overnight. But having said that, we've had some experience. We introduced Japanese as a language in 2005, if my memory serves me right. And I believe today there are about 100 schools in India which teach Japanese as a third language. But in that case, the Japan Foundation, I think, came to India and did a lot of this teacher training programs. So we actually are thinking of Hanban as the Chinese partner. We've signed an agreement. We're sort of moving on that. US and China coming together. I think there's history there. I mean, there's history there going back to the 70s and subsequently a few times after that. So in that third narrative I spoke about, where nations compete with each other, you know, you obviously want competition to be as advantageous to you as possible. And if major players sort of find common causes which are against your interests, it is a matter of concern. At the moment, I really cannot think of any issue where that's going to happen. So it's a theoretical concern. I concede it happened in the past, but if you ask me, is it something that's going to happen in the near future? My imagination has its limits. I can't think of any issue where Indian interests would be adversely affected in that situation. Chinese companies in India, do you have security concerns? I think we're getting more comfortable with each other. There are areas, some of it is in the public domain, so it's not a secret. There are industries like sectors like telecom which have been affected by security concerns. I think some of the infrastructure areas also have security sensitivities. I don't think it is something we need to be apologetic about. I think every country has its security concerns. China has its, US has its, I'm sure Singapore has its. So everybody draws a red line somewhere and says, it's a level playing field up to the red line, and beyond the red line it's my sovereign prerogative to allow people and not allow people. I think what is important is to be very upfront about it. And my own sense is, if we actually have frank and direct conversations with the Chinese official, I think people want to know what is the scope. I don't think China will push us beyond our levels of comfort. Nuclear dialogue. Yes, it's in the works. We used to have one before. We are trying to re-establish that. I think there's no objection in principle. We're just trying to close that. And similarly on the Navy, we've agreed on a maritime dialogue earlier this year. I think it should happen soon. But we don't have the incidents at sea problem. I don't think the Indian Navy and the Chinese Navy have that kind of proximity to each other which the US Navy and Soviet Navy had during the Cold War. So I think it's less an issue of avoiding an accident at sea or misunderstanding at sea. It's much more a better sense of communication on what are you doing and what am I doing. we are, I think a big change in the relationship is that India and China are talking to each other on a whole lot of issues. You know, because we've had a Central Asia dialogue, we've had a West Asia dialogue. I think as we speak, we're probably having an Africa dialogue. So we're finding more and more regions to talk about. We didn't used to do this before. And I think that itself is part of an improving relationship. Whether we have an Afghanistan dialogue or something even more sensitive, it's hard to say. I mean, but I would certainly hope, the direction is positive. So where we go, I wouldn't put limits on it. But again, part of getting it right is to respect the sensitivities of the other side. And I think we need, if both sides kind of have a good feel for where you're comfortable and where you're not, I think it sort of helps talking. So I think in this 2-3 narratives that we are talking about, one fact stands out, which is that the ability of the Indian system and the Chinese system not just to engage, but actually also to talk and talk is also growing. And I think that's good for both of them and for everybody else.
Well, I think we run out of time, and also we've worked invested very hard this morning, so I need to give his throat a rest.
Thank you.
I think it's been a very good session, but before I close, I'm going to ask my